Hey everyone, so today I'm going to be doing another upcycling video, which is kind of surprising because my last one was also an upcycling video, and like usually when I'm sewing it like takes up all my brain cells and like I don't want to do it for like 2 weeks, but that one was pretty simple, so I wanted to like challenge myself a little bit more for this one. So patchwork has been a trend that's been like kind of popular right now, and I've been really liking it recently, so I thought I should give it a try. And I also have a ton of like scrap materials and fabric which would be perfect for this. So the first thing that I wanted to make is one of these patchwork shirts that you have probably seen on Pinterest or Depop lately, and I personally think they look really cool, so I wanted to give it a try. So the thing with these shirts is that you kind of want the end result to look like the shirt has been cut up and like put back together, and some of them have like multiple different types of fabric and like colors, or and some are just like a plain, like they use the same shirt for the whole thing. But the main key thing for this shirt is really like the contrast stitching. That's what makes it look good and like give it that patchwork kind of vibe. You'll notice that like they also have some sort of like lettuce hem trim, and that just really kind of like ties the whole thing together. So I actually already tried to make one of these and it didn't really turn out so well, so I wanted to learn from my mistakes and like redeem myself and make a better version that I'm actually gonna want to wear. So for this patchwork shirt I ended up using this like light pink basic t-shirt that I just had lying around, and the t-shirt that I used had just enough stretch to make the lettuce hem work, but the more stretch you have, the better it's gonna look. And just keep in mind as well when you're choosing the t-shirt you want to transform that it is gonna get tighter like by the end of it, just because the way that the shirt is made, so just make sure that it's not too tight for you already. So the first thing that I did was I took my shirt and I marked out where I wanted my stitching to go. I kind of kept it simple and just did like 2 lines on the front and 1 on the back, but you can kind of go crazy, like you can cut out like horizontal lines and just like make it as patchy as you want it. And I used a measuring tape just to mark out like equal distances, because I just thought it would look better if it was a little bit more measured out and like looked a little bit more intentional. But because this is kind of like patchwork, it doesn't have to look perfect because it kind of is supposed to look like a DIY. So once you have your rough lines drawn out, what you're gonna do is fold the t-shirt on that line and then just pin the 2 pieces together so that it's ready to be sewn. Typically this part is done with a serger, which is like kind of like a sewing machine, except it like cuts off the edges as you sew. I don't have that, so I'm going to show you a way that like you can do it without. So this is also your opportunity to pick out what color you want your thread to be, because it is going to be super visible, and you kind of want the colors to contrast so that it like really stands out. So I ended up going with just like a basic black thread because I thought it just complemented the light pink really well and like definitely stood out that way. So we're gonna go ahead and sew. I just used a straight stitch and stitched beside the line that we drew. So once I was done sewing my 2 lines on the front and the 1 on the back, I took my scissors and I cut off all the excess fabric really close to where the stitch is, because you don't want a ton of extra fabric there. I also took this opportunity to crop the shirt because it was quite long and I did want to have that cropped look. So you obviously don't have to crop it if you don't want to, but like this would be a good time to do it. So since I don't have a serger, I'm gonna switch over to a zigzag stitch and we're gonna sew along that little piece of fabric that we had left when we were cutting it off. So to make this look good, you want one side of the zigzag stitch to go on the fabric and one to go off. That way the thread will end up like almost wrapping around that extra fabric, and that's how you want it to look. And it's gonna give you that nice clean look that's the most similar you can get to what a serger looks like. So then I just continued that on the rest of the stitches that we made. Now to really tie this whole shirt together, you actually want to do the zigzag stitch on the rest of the trim of the shirt. So around the arm, like the sleeves, around the collar, and then like the bottom hem of the shirt. And this is where you can add the nice like lettuce hem look to all those like areas. So we're going to use the same zigzag stitch that we used before, except now we're going to be pulling and stretching the fabric as we are sewing along. And that's how the lettuce hem is created, because then once the fabric goes back to normal, it's going to pull all of that stitching together, and that's what creates the lettuce hem. So as you can imagine, the stretchier your fabric, the more it can stretch and retract, and that's going to give you a better looking lettuce hem. And here is how the shirt turned out. I'm very happy with it. I think it's something that I would actually wear. The last one I made was like a little too raggedy and I was like, I don't think I'm gonna end up wearing it. But this one, I really am happy with how it all looks. And I like how I kept it simple with just like the 2 lines in the front. I think it's just like the right amount, like for me at least. Like you could definitely do more, but I just really like how simple this one is. And a lot of these shirts are usually with like a tight, like almost like mock neck collar, and this one is a little bit wider, which I thought like wouldn't look as good, but I think it really suits it, especially like with the lettuce hem and everything. And this was honestly pretty easy to do. It does take up a little bit of time, but I feel like this is like a good project for someone who maybe hasn't like sewed a whole lot in their life. So yeah, I think this one turned out really well, so let's move on to the next one. So the next thing I wanted to make were these patchwork jeans from the Ragged Priest that you may have seen, and they actually have a few different styles of like different colors and like different amount of sections, like different amount of patches. But I really like these ones because I liked the color gradient and I thought it was like simple enough to do. So I actually have a ton of scrap denim fabric from basically every time I have cut pants into shorts over the years, which actually like works perfectly for this project. So I had all like the leg sections covered, but I still needed like a base short with like a zipper and everything for the main part of the pants. So I was actually looking through my Depop inventory to see if I had anything that would work, and I dug up these Lee shorts that I've been trying to sell for like a year and a half now. So I figured these would actually be perfect for this project. And then I also decided to use this other pair of jeans for another part of the leg section because I kind of needed an extra fabric that was like a little bit different from the others. And these had a huge hole in the leg anyways, so I ended up cutting them into shorts and I could sell them like as shorts now. So that kind of like worked out. So I started to plan out where I wanted each piece of fabric to go. I was trying to make it as similar to the original jeans as possible and trying to do that kind of like gradient effect where it goes from like dark to light wash jean. And then firstly I lined up the Lee shorts with those other pants and then just cut along that same cutoff point as the shorts, just making sure too that both of those pieces like lined up and were the correct width, so that when I sew them together there won't be like extra loose fabric. So then I pinned those leg pieces to the shorts, just making sure that I pinned them to the outside so that we can actually see that raw hem as you can see in the original jeans. I didn't realize this till a little bit later, but it's best to try and line up the 2 existing outside seams so that they line up perfectly on the outside rather than the inside, because the outside is just going to be more visible than the inside. So then I just started to sew the 2 pieces together with a normal straight stitch, and then once they were perfectly attached I went around a second time and did another straight stitch right beside the existing one. It just prevents the raw hem from completely fraying and then having the stitching like completely come undone. And then I just repeated that whole process on the other leg. So then I took my next color of denim and arranged it onto the pants, and this one was a little bit tricky because I only had one pant leg to work with. I don't know where the other one went, so I only had like a certain amount of fabric I could use, and I had to make sure that they were both going to be the right width for each side of the pants. They also had paint stains on them, which was a little bit unfortunate, so I was trying to cut around that as well. So once I figured out where I wanted them to be placed and that they were the correct widths and everything, I pinned them to the jeans and repeated that whole sewing process again. And then one side of that fabric ended up being a little bit shorter than the other, so I decided just to seam rip the hem just to give it a little bit more length and make it easier to sew on the next piece. So the last white piece of denim was actually too wide to fit onto the existing pant leg, so I actually had to take in a bunch of that fabric so that they would line up with the pants. So I basically just sewed a simple stitch down the side of each of the pant legs and then cut off the excess fabric, and then I basically just attached those final pieces and sewed them on, and I was basically done. So this is how they turned out. I'm really happy with them. Honestly, I was kind of nervous to even work with denim. I was afraid like I was gonna run into so many problems and like the needle was gonna break, but it honestly went really smoothly and it was relatively a simple project. It just took quite a bit of time. I think they're a pretty big statement pant and I think I'm gonna end up wearing them. So a few things that I wish I could go back and change is ideally these 2 denims would be a little bit more contrasting in color. Like this one should be like more dark, but I feel like they're like just different enough where it kind of works. I also should have spaced out each piece a little bit better, and I should have done this by actually cutting the original shorts even shorter than they were. I thought it would be fine, but it kind of just left not as much space for the rest of the pieces, especially the last one here. So if I were to do it again, I would have done that and spaced them out better so each panel was more like equal in size. And then one little mistake that I made that I didn't really think was going to be that big of a problem is that the fabric did fold over here while I was sewing, and you can't really notice it, but because these pants are already like fit me pretty well, it does create like a little bit of a tight spot there when I wear them. So it's not a big deal, but I kind of wish I fixed it when I could have. But overall, I'm really happy with them, and I think they actually do look pretty similar to the Ragged Priest version. So for the final upcycle, I still had a bunch of this denim fabric left over even after I did make the pants. So I thought it would be really cool if I could turn them into a patchwork bucket hat. So my inspiration came from this Teddy Fresh patchwork bucket hat that I thought looked really cool, and I thought that I could try and like replicate that. So I gathered up 4 different types of fabrics that I wanted to use for the bucket hat. I actually followed this really helpful tutorial that I'll link below because I have never made a bucket hat before, and in it she provides you with these really easy patterns that you can cut out and use to make patterns for your fabric. So I started out by cutting out all the pieces I would need for the headband, and because my version is patchwork, it is a little bit different in the way that you use the patterns. So for the patchwork version, you are going to need to cut out 4 of the headband templates, and once I had all 4 of my different types of fabric cut out, I just pinned them all together to see what they would look like together. And this was the moment when I realized the corduroy, as much as I loved it, it just really wasn't working well with the rest of the fabrics, so I decided to swap it out with another shade of blue denim, and I think that it ended up looking a lot better, and all the colors just like complemented each other a lot more. So I arranged them in a way I thought they would look good next to each other. This is when you kind of have to decide how your pattern is going to be and which colors are like directly beside each other. And then I just basically sewed all those pieces together until I had a circular headband shape. So next I had to make the top part, which is like that circular shape, and in order to split this into 4, what I did was just fold the pattern in half one way and then fold it the opposite way so that it was split into 4 sections, and then I just basically cut along the folds that I made, and then I basically just had a little quarter of the circle that was going to be my pattern for each of the pieces. And I would just keep in mind to leave like a tiny bit extra of seam allowance just because we are sewing double the amount of fabric together than her version, so things are going to start to like shrink a little bit more the more patches that you add. So my recommendation would be to arrange the colors in the exact same way that you arranged the colors in the headband. That way what you can do is just rotate that whole circle onto the headband to see where you like it, and that way none of the existing colors will ever be like directly touching each other, if that's like the look that you're going for. And then I just began to sew all the pieces of the circle together. So once I had my circle, I attached it to the headband, and before sewing you just want to make sure that all of your seams line up perfectly, or as much as you can, just to give it like a cleaner look overall at the end. And then all the lines from your seams will be running the same way and it'll be like a straight line. So now that I have my circle attached to the headband, it's starting to look more like a hat. So next I started to cut out the patterns for the final pieces of the brim. Obviously it would be a lot more streamlined if you just cut out all your pieces in the beginning, but because my version was a little bit different, I wasn't really sure how it was going to end up being, so I just wanted to cut like as I went for each part of the hat. So for this pattern you want to cut out 2 for each color of the fabric, since you are going to be able to see the top and the underside of the brim and you want 2 sides to make it look nice. So once you have all your patterns cut, you're going to take your 2 same colored pieces and put them together, making sure that the good side is facing inward. And then you're going to sew along the bottom, which is like the longest side of the brim, to connect the pieces together. And once all of your fabrics are sewn to their matching colors, you're going to want to be able to connect all these colors together now. So you're going to take them by the edges and you're going to make sure you attach them and line them up with the seam. And you're going to start to attach each piece together until they're all connected and it kind of makes this like donut shape. So to give the brim a little bit more structure, you're going to want to sew a bunch of lines around the whole brim over and over again, and this is just going to make it like a little bit more stronger. So I ended up sewing about 7. They were each about 1 centimeter apart, and I just kept sewing lines until there was enough rings that went up the whole perimeter of the brim. So now that the brim is nice and sturdy, all you have to do is attach it to the rest of the hat and sew it down and make sure all the pieces are secured, and you have yourself your bucket hat. So this one might actually be my favorite thing that I made. I've literally never worn a bucket hat before, but I feel like now I'm gonna have to start. And I kind of want to make like a bunch of these maybe for my Depop, since it was pretty simple to make and I still have like tons of scrap fabric left. And I honestly think this one looks kind of cooler than the Teddy Fresh one because theirs wasn't even really made out of denim, and I personally really like the black. I think it just looks really good next to like blue denim. Here you can see like this is what I meant when I said you need to line up these together, and like that's how it creates these like really nice clean lines here. So overall I'm really happy with how all of these turned out. Like I said before, I was kind of nervous to work with denim, but I think they all look really cool and they're like super unique pieces, and I think I'm gonna wear all of them. I don't know, we're gonna see. But yeah, I think I'm gonna take a break from sewing for a little bit because it does take a lot out of you. Like all these projects ended up taking me like 2 full days to complete, so it is a lot of work. And I feel like 90% of sewing is actually just like measuring and then troubleshooting like all the problems that come your way. So it really does take a lot out of you. But let me know which one was your favorite in the comments, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you later. Bye.